Hello, this is Jim McKeith, Lead Developer Evangelist for Embarcadero Technologies. I've got a little video here showing you how to debug against a remote Android emulator. This is something I tried to figure out, so I'm just kind of putting a video together here to show out everybody else how to do this. So the scenario is you have your development machine and you want to connect to a remote machine running the Android emulator. Now in my case, they're actually both the same machine, but the development machine is a guest OS inside a virtual machine, VMware, running on the host OS, where I'm going to have the Android emulator running. Now, the reason I want to do this is because the Android emulator is slow, but it is ridiculously, impossibly slow in VMware. It's technically still supported according to Google, but it's just too slow to be usable, so it's not going to work. So I'm going to show you how to run your development tool in the guest OS in VMware on your host machine where the Android emulator is running, and then the Android emulator is actually going to be usable. It's still going to be slow, but it's going to be usable. So prerequisites: you need to have the Android SDK must be installed in both machines. You need to have a firewall and network connections open from the guest to host, and then you need to have SSH, a server on the host and client on the guest. And you need to know where the SDK is installed on both machines. I'm going to walk through the steps with you, and then I'm going to show you how to do this. Set up the host. And my host is Mac OS 10, so you're going to go into System Preferences Sharing and turn on Remote Login. I have all users selected. If you want to be specific to certain users, you can do that. Then you need to download the Android SDK, and you're going to visit developer.android.com/SDK. And you're going to download, not here, this is going to download Eclipse with it as well, the ADT bundle. You're going to go down here to say use existing ID. You're going to say download the SDK tools for Mac. All right, and you're going to download that and extract it someplace on the hard drive on your host OS, Mac OS 10 in my case, and make sure you remember where that's at. Then you're going to run the SDK manager. And then the SDK manager you're going to use to download at least the ARM system image, and you're probably going to want to download the Google APIs too. You need those if you want to have the Google Maps and stuff like that. The ARM system image is the one you want. That's the actual image of what your hardware is running, ARM v7. Then you're going to run the AVD manager to create an Android virtual device. Make sure your Android virtual device says use host GPU. This will make a huge difference on the performance of your emulator. Launch the AVD. Then on your guest, you need to install PuTTY. You can download PuTTY from that URL there. If you just do a search for PuTTY SSH, I'm sure you can find this. And then any SSH client will actually work. So create a PuTTY HTTP connection to the host. You're just going to specify the host's IP address, and then you're going to go over here to the right where it says connection, and then you're going to open up to SSH and open up tunnels, and you're going to add those two tunnels. You're creating a local destination to localhost from 5555 to 5555. And again, I'll show you exactly what this looks like in a second. Then you're going to connect via SSH, and then you're going to open a new command prompt on the guest OS, and you're going to type adb kill server, and you make sure either adb is on your path or you explicitly specify the path, and in wherever your SDK is /platform tools, and you're going to say adb devices, and at that point you should see emulator 5554 listed. You need to leave the SSH window open and everything will work beautifully. All right, so let's go ahead and walk through this. So you've downloaded the SDK and you need to extract it somewhere on your computer. In my case, on my hard drive, in my folder called Developer, I have a folder called Android SDK. Now, in the SDK directory, there's two paths you need to be aware of, the path to ADB and the path to Android. So Android is going to be an SDK Tools Android. Now, if I double-click on this, it brings up the Android SDK Manager. This is what you use to download and update the various parts of the Android SDK. Now, I want to use Android 4.2.2, which is Jelly Bean, API level 17, and you'll notice I have the ARM system image and Google APIs installed. That's what I need to have installed. Okay, from here on the toolbar up at top, which you can't see because it's on my other monitor, there's an option that says Tools. And if you click on that, you're going to click on the option that says Manage AVDs, and you'll get this window here. This is the window that lets you use to create an Android virtual device. So you're going to say New, you're going to say Device. This is just a default screen configurations. I'm going to stick with Nexus 4, and then you select the API level you want. Now I have, since I had API 17, I also have 18 installed. If you download the Google APIs, then you'll have this one option as well. Okay, so you select the one you want, and notice it says ARM v7 here. And then the really important part is you want to say use host GPU. Also, it's helpful to usually specify an SD card, 100 megabytes. That's what I use. I don't know if it needs to be anything else. And then you give it a name, Nexus 4. I've already created one, so I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. And I've actually already got it running right here. When you start the AVD, if you use the scale display to real size, you can mess with this, get something around 0.5, and it makes this a manageable size. Otherwise, it's quite big because, well, Android devices have lots of pixels on the screen, especially the newer ones. Okay. Then the one last thing is you need to set up the SSH. So you do that by going into System Preferences on your Mac, and then you're going to go to Sharing and put a check mark in Remote Login. Okay, so now our host is all set up. So now we need to go into our client, which, like I said, in my case is VMware. I'm running Windows 8 in VMware. And you know the path to my ADB. Now, ADB gets installed with Delphi or any other Android development tools typically. In my case, I've installed it separately. Wherever it is, know what the path is to it. And I've added the path, Program Files, Android SDK Platform Tools, to my path statement. There I've added the path to my path statement so that I can get to it easily, just from the command prompt automatically. Okay, so now if I go into Delphi right now, under Target, refresh, nothing's there. That's what we're going to fix. So I'm going to run PuTTY. You're going to put your host IP address in here, give it a name so you can save it. But before you do that, go down here to expand SSH tunnels, and you're going to add a new tunnel. You want this to be local auto. You're going to take 5555 local host 5555, and then hit add, and then say 5554 local host 5554. Now, these are the ports that the emulator uses to talk to ADB. And so what you're doing is you're going to say map those ports from the host OS back to the guest OS. All right, once you've done that, and you're going to come in here to session with the IP address and save session, you're going to save that, select it, hit open. Now I need to log in to my host OS. So I'm going to provide my host OS login credentials. And there I've logged in. Now you can verify those settings or change them if you need to. If you come in here to change settings, tunnels, you can see right here, L for local, 5555, localhost 5555, etc. All right, so I'm actually connected. Now I can actually minimize this and just leave this opened. That's done what it needs to do. Now I need to launch a new command window, command prompt, and I'm going to type ADB, because remember ADB is on my path, and say kill server. This is going to kill the service that runs in the background that connects to the emulators. In this case, it wasn't running. ADB devices. This is going to restart the server and then list all the devices. And you see right now it says emulator 5554. It says it's a device. So it doesn't know that it's an emulator. That's interesting. So now if I go into Delphi and right click on target and hit refresh, you'll see it sees my Nexus Jelly Bean, which is my emulator. So now I'm going to go ahead and run this little demo app. It's the IB Lite demo that was actually originally developed for iOS, but you can see it's beautiful, it's magical. It's just going to run on my Nexus 4 emulator. So I'll just switch to my emulator. And there it came up. This is a lot slower than it'll be on actual hardware, but I can click the button here, interact with it through the emulator, and new task, test, hit OK. There was an option there for use hardware keyboard that was selected. That means I can just type without having to bring up the virtual keyboard. Test 2. And then I can select these and hit delete. So nice little demo of IB Lite. It's a bonus today, and showing you how to set up the SSH tunnel from your guest OS to your host OS so that you can use a remote emulator. So this emulator, you can see, is running in Mac OS. It just happens to be on top of the window that's running VMware. So this is my VMware window behind it. If I click on this, you see it's gone. It's not over here in my taskbar. If I want it back, I have to go back to Mac OS and switch back to the emulator, bring it back to the front. If I close PuTTY, if I close this window, then I will lose that connection, or if my IP address changes. So make sure those things don't happen, and you'll be able to remain connected to your emulator for debugging purposes. I've had this work really well. We've got very good success with this.